There are 4 teams that don't get talked about enough to use in your dynasty in the new EA College Football 25 video game. First up, Minnesota. Minnesota has been a very popular suggestion recently, so we're going to dive into them. Minnesota is coming off its worst season since 2017. Obviously, take out the 2020 season because they didn't play a full season. However, they still won their bowl game, as PJ Fleck always does. Minnesota actually has a pretty good class in terms for Minnesota. It was 33rd in the country, but they got a key player. Coy Parrish, the second highest recruit in Minnesota history. Coy is a 4-star, 72nd player nationally, number 5 safety, and the number 1 player out of Minnesota. He won MVP in the All-American Bowl. He'll be a key player for immediate impact. You also have Riley Sunrum, the defensive lineman. He's 6'4", 275, the number 1 player from North Dakota, 4-star. Brett Carroll, the number 3 lineman out of Kansas, who is also in the All-American Bowl. Definitely be an inside player, but you could even play him at center. Now, Minnesota got a decent amount of transfers, but the key one is at quarterback. Max Brosmer from New Hampshire. The offense was quite lackluster in 2023, so this guy will be huge in the game. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the FCS last year. He threw for 3,459 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. The year before, he threw for 3,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, so you see the consistency. You also have transfer Christian Driver coming in at wide receiver. Also got Ethan Robinson, who will play corner over the Bucknell transfer. Not to mention Jackson Howard coming home, transferring in from LSU. Former 4-star defensive end will be able to shine in Minnesota. Not a successful ride on Max Brosmer, but he'll be there for it in the game. Not to mention, you get 2 of the best rivalries in all of college football. You can win the Floyd of Rosedale back-to-back for the first time since 2010-2011, or win Paul Bunyan's Axe, the most played rivalry in Division I FBS. Minnesota has a 10-win season as recently as 2019 when they won 11, beating my Auburn Tigers in the Outback Bowl. Last undefeated season was in 1941, so you could lead them to their first in a long time. Now, Minnesota does have a handful of national championships, 7. The last one coming in 1960. And you can try to do something that no one else has been able to do except for Minnesota, and do the three-peat again for the second time. Minnesota won 3 straight national championships from 1934 to 1936. Last Division I team to do so. There were a lot of three-peats before that, but that's when there was like 15 teams playing and sometimes 5 teams playing if you go even further back, so they weren't as impressive as this one. Also won back-to-back championships in 1940 and 41. Also during that span from 1939 to 1942, they went on an 18-game winning streak. So Minnesota is an incredible choice. You got a bright future, awesome new uniforms, by the way, which should be in the game. I did see from a Matt Brown Q&A that they had been given uniforms from schools that hadn't been released yet, so they could go ahead and have them made to release when they do come out, because honestly, teams make so many new uniforms now, so it makes sense. Next, we have Kansas State. Kansas State is coming off another solid year under Kleiman, 9-4, and won the most important bowl game in all of college football history, the Pop-Tarts Bowl. This is a program that has been underrated since the 90s. I mean, so much winning has been done here. They've won 10 games 10 times, had 11-1 seasons. They've been to multiple important bowl games like the Sugar Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Cotton Bowl multiple times. The one thing that has evaded Kansas State since they got good at football is the national title. Crazy enough, Kansas State has never won any team NCAA championships. You could win Kansas State their first national title in any team sport. You can also get them that first undefeated season. They did have an undefeated regular season in 1998, but they lost their last 2 games. Now, you also got the Sunflower Showdown rivalry with Kansas, which going forward should be a really fun rivalry now in college football with both programs surging up. You also have the best rivalry name ever, Farmageddon with Iowa State. Talk about what makes this team so great. This might even be the team I use in my online dynasty. Before we get into recruiting, let's just talk about what they got. Avery Johnson, the possible breakout candidate in real life and in the game, could be like a Johnny Manziel Jr. We got Colorado transfer Dylan Edwards to join DJ Giddens in the backfield. Talk about being able to run a read option all game. Still have solid offensive linemen with a lot of freshmen you can plug in, which I'll talk about in a second, and a strong defense. We got transfer Dante Cephas as well, who is reuniting with his old receivers coach, so you could see him pop off. One thing you can always count on is Kansas State having a big line. Protecting Avery is huge. Now, you also got a great backup for Avery Johnson. If you run him too much with the new wear and tear system, I'll tell you about Taquan Robertson, having a 2,000-yard passing season last year at UConn. He's a former 4-star, by the way. All those linemen freshmen I was talking about, you got plenty coming in to build depth for an online dynasty or your normal dynasty. Ryan Howard, Gus Hawkins, Caden Massey. Ryan is 6'7", 315. His older brother was actually Will Howard. Gus Hawkins is 6'7", 270. Gus is a 4-star and the number 24 overall offensive tackle. Lastly, Caden Massey, 270, 6'8". 4-star number 28 offensive tackle, number 4 player in Kansas. He was the 2023 Sports in Kansas Offensive Lineman of the Year for small classification, as well as being first team All-State. Like I said, they love that line at Kansas State. This is going to be such a fun team to not really rebuild, but build up even more, especially for an online dynasty with Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens, like I said, just being able to run that ball everywhere. Elite uniforms. I love Kansas State uniforms. A great size stadium in Bill Snyder Family Stadium. Next, Rutgers, birthplace of college football. Most people know, but just in case you don't, the first intercollegiate football game took place November 6, 1869 between Rutgers and Princeton. Now, the Shiana rebuild is on schedule. Coming off their first bowl win since 2014, Rutgers had a 7-6 season. Their most wins also since 2014. Now, it's been almost 20 years since a double-digit win season, and they have not had an undefeated season since 1976 when they went 11-0. Most wins in a season are 11, and you can pass that. If I'm correct, I also don't think they've been ranked since 2012. Now, Rutgers does have one national championship, 1869, and one conference title in 2012. No, not Big Ten, a Big East title. However, they were co-champions, so it was not an outright championship. You can be the first to win one of those. The best part about the national championship from 1869, there were only two teams. We went 1-1 against Princeton, and the teams were co-national champions. Now, let's talk about what we should be excited about with this team, and this could be a fantastic fun rebuild. I love the simple uniforms. They look great and an underrated stadium. Rutgers actually had a really solid defense last year, and they have a ton of returning production on that side of the ball. Not just returning in production and guys cycling in, but a lot of starters. Plus, if you're someone who likes to play the real schedules like I do, that very first season I play in Dynasty, I keep the normal schedule to kind of try to keep it as real life as possible. Rutgers avoids Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, and Penn State this year. The best teams on your schedule you get at home, but you do have a tough trip to Virginia Tech in Week 4, which is a battle of two teams with a lot of returning production and a possible team that I'll be talking about in the very near future. Enough we talked about Minnesota. Well, Minnesota's quarterback last year is now Rutgers' quarterback. His brother came along with him. If you like brother connections, you can go Calicamanus to Calicamanus, quarterback to wide receiver, make that connection. Wimsat hitting the portal. It is now officially Athan's job. Now, a huge problem for Rutgers in the past has been quarterbacks, and Athan's not necessarily the best, but he's still kind of an upgrade statistically. He does tend to hold the ball too long, but in the game, you get to make the decisions for him. And you do have Kyle Monagai coming back. He actually led all Big Ten rushers with over 1,200 yards last year. You can have a pretty gnarly rushing attack with this team. You also have last year's leading receiver, Dremel. Shout out to him as well. He was named a candidate for the Burlsworth Trophy last year. Walk-on that is making a name for himself. You also have four-star transfer Dymere Miller coming in at wide receiver from Monmouth. The fact that Rutgers was able to get Miller is actually crazy, insanely underrated, and will bring a ton of value to this receiving core. Best part for that rushing attack, returning 6 offensive linemen. Were shuffled around last year, but most of them were all starters last year at one point or another. So with this schedule, that wall up front, if you love a good rushing attack, Rutgers is for you. Good traditional uniforms. If you like the normal schedules, like I said, an easy, manageable schedule, Rutgers is a great breakout team for a fun dynasty team, online dynasty team. Heck, even in real life this coming year. I'd also give them their first ever back-to-back double-digit win seasons. The closest they ever came was 1975, 1976 when they went 9-2 in 75 and 11-0 in 1976. Don't sleep on this team. This could be a fun online dynasty team for sure. Last but not least, ECU. If you love watching it build up, ECU is the place for you. Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium, ECU Stadium, is the second biggest stadium in North Carolina, holding 51,000, and you'll be able to see that thing build up. It's a great stadium for a smaller school. East Carolina is coming off a rough year. They went 2-10, their worst record since 2004. Their last conference title came in 2009, enough when Skip Holtz was coaching there, who is now the Birmingham Stallions head coach. Now, the good news is ECU had the third-ranked transfer class in the AAC. Line them up, Power 5 transfers just came on in. Now, the offense last year was abysmal for ECU. Last season, they had their least amount of points in the season since 1986. Good thing about that, you got 2 new quarterbacks coming in. Jake Garcia, the Missouri transfer, and Caton Hauser from Michigan State. Now, in all honesty, it really can't get worse than it was last year. Someone's going to come in and win this job, and the great part about this is they're going to be better, just even if they're not that great. Now let's talk about what is great about this team. Ed Stevens on the D-line. Honorable mention All-AAC player is a key piece up front for them. Then we have Siobhan Ravel, DB. He was second team All-AAC. On the offensive side of the ball, you got Rajai Harris. There is a lot of unknown around the offense, but at least there are some bright points. Potential is there. We just have to know whether it's going to work or not. Sal, 47 grabs for 622 yards. Pretty good for a freshman. Like I said, transfers, baby. Winston Wright Jr. from Florida State will help a lot in that room. And let's not forget Anthony Smith, the North Carolina State transfer. One thing you can do, last year their offense never even had 250 passing yards in a game. You can do that week 1 in your dynasty. Jake Garcia and Caton Hauser will lead this team as much as they can, but in the game, you will be in control. The uniforms are elite at ECU. Logo is awesome. One of the best color schemes possible in sports. And the throwbacks, my favorite uniform in football. Now, Steve Logan is the all-time leader in games coached, years coached, and wins at ECU. He coached from 1992 to 2002, and he had 67 wins. So if you're looking to get the all-time wins record as the coach, you need 68. Now let's talk rivalries. fantastic here. Hopefully the series has been extended in real life for 2025 and 2028. We know it's hard for schools to kind of schedule each other now with everything that's shaken up in the world. And you're only 6 behind, so it's not that hard to catch up in a dynasty. Also talk about all the other possible rivalries you can have. North Carolina, you only trail by 6, but ECU's won the last 3. Duke is split 50-50, 5-5. Last playing in 2005. Wake Forest leads 6-2, but they haven't played since 2005 as well. App State that you trail by 9, an incredible uniform or stadium matchup. And last but not least, you got Charlotte, a new one, but a good one. So much in-state potential. Hell, you could even create a Carolina conference. That sounds nice. Let's throw some South Carolina teams in there. There's just endless regionality available for a dynasty with ECU. Easily one of the most underrated teams for a dynasty at all. You got uniforms. You got a stadium that can get bigger as you go. You got great regionality rivalries. You got a good recruiting bed that you can get into the South. It's just a great one. So ECU is one you should not sleep on.